The roar of the crowd shook the stadium, lights blazing down on the field like 1,000 miniature suns. I had been waiting for this night for months, the championship game where my son, Ethan, would finally step into the spotlight. He wasn't just playing football, he was leading the team as quarterback, the role he'd worked his entire teenage years for. And me? I sat in the stands, dressed in my old denim jacket, clutching a cheap hot dog and a beer, smiling like the proudest dad in America. The bleachers around me rattled with chants, cheerleaders whipped the air into electricity, and all I could think about was how far Ethan had come. But then, in the middle of this fevered chaos, it happened. Ethan turned toward the stands, not in search of encouragement, not for a proud nod from his father. His eyes locked on me, sharp and burning. The entire stadium seemed to freeze for that moment, though in reality, I knew only I felt the freeze. He walked closer, right up to the sidelines where I sat, just a few rows back. In front of hundreds of screaming fans, his teammates, and his coaches, my son grabbed a can of beer off the bench. His jaw clenched, his chest heaved, and without hesitation, he hurled it straight at me. The can exploded on impact, drenching my shirt, soaking through my jacket. Cold liquid dripped down my face. The crowd erupted into a mix of gasps and laughter. Some even cheered, thinking it was some kind of stunt. But Ethan's words silenced the confusion in my chest more than the beer ever could. "You're nobody," he shouted, his voice carrying across the field. I froze, heart hammering, throat tightening like a fist. My boy, the child I raised alone after his mother left us, the kid whose scraped knees I patched, whose science projects I stayed up until dawn to help finish, whose dreams I'd fueled with every extra shift at the factory. He had just humiliated me in front of everyone. Nobody. The word repeated itself inside my skull, twisting, digging deeper than any insult I had ever faced in my life. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to defend myself, to yell back, to remind him who had been there for him when the world wasn't. But I couldn't move. My legs felt like iron rods welded to the cold concrete. The people around me were whispering, some pointing, others just staring. In that instant, I wasn't just humiliated, I was erased. But then, something shifted. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a man 2 rows down standing slowly, his face pale with shock. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Ethan, and he was shaking his head. Then another person rose. And another. The laughter that had filled the air seconds ago began to wither into murmurs of discomfort. Something bigger than embarrassment was about to happen. And I didn't know it then. But this night, this public humiliation, would ignite a chain of events that neither my son nor the world around us could ever take back. Because while Ethan thought he had just destroyed me, he had no idea what storm was coming for him. The rest of the game blurred in front of my eyes. Players clashed on the field, helmets colliding, the announcer's voice booming through the speakers, but I heard none of it. All I could feel was the sticky beer soaking into my clothes and the sting of Ethan's words echoing in my head. "You're nobody." It wasn't just humiliation. It was betrayal. I raised that boy in a small working-class neighborhood in Cleveland, Ohio. Every dollar I made went to keep him fed, clothed, and on the field. When the factory cut my hours, I worked nights at the gas station just to cover his football gear and travel expenses for tournaments. I thought he knew. I thought he appreciated. But as the clock ticked toward the final minutes of the game, I realized he didn't see me as a father anymore. He saw me as disposable. The final whistle blew, the crowd went wild, and the team stormed the field in a sea of helmets and confetti. Ethan was lifted on shoulders, golden boy of the night. Cameras flashed. Reporters swarmed. And me? I sat drenched and invisible. I finally stood, heart heavier than the steel beams I hauled every day at work. My chest ached as though the whole stadium had conspired to crush me. I shuffled down the stairs, people stepping aside, some avoiding my gaze, others smirking. They had seen everything. Parents, kids, strangers. My shame was now public property. Outside the stadium, the cool night air hit me like a slap. Streetlights flickered over rows of parked cars. Horns honked as fans tried to beat the traffic. I leaned against my rusty old pickup truck, staring at the steering wheel through the cracked windshield. How did we get here? I remembered Ethan as a boy, chasing fireflies in the yard, falling asleep on my chest after long shifts, promising me he'd make it big one day so Dad never has to work again. His voice used to be filled with hope, Now it was poisoned with contempt. My hands trembled as I gripped the door handle. I wanted to drive home and disappear, drown myself in silence. But just as I pulled the door open, I heard footsteps behind me. "Sir." I turned. A man in a gray suit stood there, polished shoes shining under the streetlight. He looked out of place among the rowdy football fans. His face was tense, eyes fixed on me with something between pity and urgency. "I saw what happened out there," he said. "And you need to know, that wasn't just a tantrum from your son. There's more going on here than you realize." My brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" The man glanced around, as if making sure no one else was listening. "Ethan, he's been involved with people he shouldn't be. People who will drag him down, and if you don't step in soon, you'll lose him forever." The words cut through the haze in my mind like a blade. My humiliation began to twist into something else, dread. I opened my mouth to ask who he was, how he knew Ethan, what this was all about. But before I could, the man slipped a folded paper into my hand. "Read this when you're alone," he muttered. Then he turned, disappearing into the crowd like a shadow. I looked down. The paper was damp from the sweat of my hand, but the bold letters scrawled across it were still clear. "The truth about your son." My pulse spiked. Whatever was written inside, it would change everything. And in that moment, I realized tonight's humiliation was only the beginning. I sat in the cab of my pickup, the engine off, the world outside buzzing with post-game chaos. My hands shook as I unfolded the paper, careful not to rip it. The stadium lights in the distance flickered through the windshield, and I could still hear the crowd celebrating. They were cheering my son, the same boy who had just called me nobody. The note was written in rushed, uneven handwriting, like someone had scribbled it in a hurry. "Ethan is in trouble. He's been gambling, owing money. He's connected with people from the underground scene in Cleveland. They've got their claws in him. If he doesn't pay up, they'll ruin his life. Maybe yours too." I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Gambling? My son? Ethan was just 19. He was supposed to be focused on football, college scouts, his future, not shady debts and criminals. I read it again, the words burning deeper each time. The letter wasn't long, but it felt heavier than the steel bolts I carried at the plant. I leaned back, staring at the truck's ceiling, fighting the swirl in my chest. My son didn't just humiliate me tonight. He was drowning in something darker. And that outburst, that public humiliation, wasn't just hate. It was desperation. "Damn it, Ethan," I whispered, slamming the steering wheel with the heel of my hand. I could have left it there. I could have driven home, shut the door, and told myself he'd chosen his path. But that wasn't who I was. Not after raising him alone. Not after promising myself that no matter how tough life got, I'd never abandon him like his mother did. The note wasn't signed. I didn't know if I could trust it, but my gut told me it was real. Too real. I fired up the engine. The truck coughed, headlights flickering to life. I didn't know where to go, but I knew I couldn't sit there any longer. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "If you want to save your son, meet me tomorrow at midnight. Dock 47, Cleveland Harbor. Don't tell him. Don't tell anyone." My blood ran cold. I stared at the screen, the glow lighting up the cab. Every instinct screamed this was dangerous, maybe even a trap. But the thought of Ethan being swallowed by men who didn't care about him, who saw him only as debt, twisted my stomach. I drove home on autopilot, the streets of Cleveland flashing by in a blur of neon signs, boarded-up shops, and the distant hum of late-night traffic. My small house stood lonely at the end of the block, porch light flickering. Inside, it smelled faintly of old coffee and motor oil. I dropped into my worn recliner, the note still clutched in my fist. My eyes drifted to the framed picture on the mantel. Ethan at age 10, holding his first football, grinning with a gap-toothed smile, his arm slung around my neck. That kid would never have thrown beer at his father. That kid would never have said, "You're nobody." So what happened between then and now? Sleep never came that night. I sat in silence, listening to the hum of the fridge and the occasional bark of a dog outside, the note burning in my hand. By the time dawn broke, I had already made up my mind. I would go to Dock 47, and whatever awaited me there, truth, lies, or danger, I would face it. Because if I didn't, I'd lose my son for good. Morning came heavy and gray, Cleveland skies sagging with clouds that threatened rain. I hadn't slept. My body ached, but my mind was sharper than ever, sharpened by fear, anger, and a gnawing sense of urgency. Ethan came home just after 10 a.m. He walked in wearing his Letterman jacket, headphones hanging around his neck, the scent of cologne and cheap beer following him. His smile wasn't the smile I remembered. It was forced, cocky, the kind that tried to cover up cracks underneath. "Big game, huh?" he muttered, not even looking at me as he tossed his duffel onto the couch. I clenched my jaw. "Big game? You humiliated me in front of the entire stadium." He froze. His eyes darted to me, a flash of guilt quickly buried under a smirk. "Dad, don't take it so personal. You wouldn't understand." "Wouldn't understand?" My voice cracked, raw from holding back too much. "I worked my whole life to keep you on that field. Every dollar, every hour, every broken bone in my back was for you. And last night, you threw it in my face. Literally." For a second, I saw him flinch. The boy I raised flickered through the arrogance. But just as quickly, he straightened, crossing his arms. "You think working a few factory shifts makes you a hero? You don't know the pressure I'm under, Dad. The scouts, the scholarships, the money." My stomach dropped. "The money?" "Ethan," I said carefully, stepping closer, "what money?" His jaw locked. He turned away, grabbing the TV remote. "Forget it. Just drop it, all right?" That was my answer. He was hiding something that could bury him alive. I wanted to shake him, to force the truth out, but I stopped myself. Whoever wrote that note, whoever texted me, they might know more than Ethan would ever admit. So I kept quiet. For now, the day dragged like wet cement. Ethan left again, mumbling about celebrating with friends. I knew better. My gut screamed he wasn't going to celebrate. He was going to sink deeper into the mess he'd made. By evening, I was pacing the living room, staring at the clock. Midnight couldn't come fast enough. Every tick of the second hand was a reminder that my son's future hung by a thread. At 11:30, I slipped on my jacket and grabbed the flashlight from the garage. My old pickup coughed to life, its headlights cutting through the dark, rain-slicked streets. The closer I got to the harbor, the more the city changed, bright neighborhoods fading into rusted warehouses and flickering neon bars. By the time I reached Dock 47, the air smelled of salt, oil, and decay. Rusted shipping containers stood like tombstones, shadows stretching long under the pale glow of street lamps. I parked a block away, heart thundering, and walked the rest of the distance. Each step echoed too loudly against the wet pavement. The dock itself was deserted, or so it seemed. The water lapped quietly against the pylons, and a faint fog clung to the surface. Then I saw him. The man from last night, gray suit, polished shoes, standing near the edge of the dock, hands in his pockets. His face was hidden under the brim of a fedora, but I recognized the posture. "You came," he said, voice low, steady. I swallowed hard. "I'm here. Now tell me what's happening to my son." The man turned slowly, his eyes meeting mine, sharp as knives. "Ethan's in deeper than you can imagine. And if you don't act fast, you won't just lose him, you'll lose yourself, too." My pulse pounded in my ears. The night air felt heavier. "What do you mean?" I asked. He stepped closer, slipping a small envelope from his jacket and pressing it into my hand. Inside is proof. Names, deaths, dates. But understand this. Once you see it, there's no going back. I stared at the envelope, rain dripping onto its surface. And I knew. The truth was about to break me. The envelope felt heavier than it should have, like it was filled with stones instead of paper. My fingers trembled as I tore it open, the sound of ripping paper echoing louder than the waves slapping against the dock. Inside were several folded sheets. I pulled them out under the dim glow of the street lamp, careful not to let the rain soak through. The first page was a list, messy, handwritten, but terrifyingly clear. Debts, numbers, names. Each line was a transaction, like a twisted ledger. And there, written over and over, was my son's name, Ethan Miller. Next to it, dollar amounts that made my stomach twist. Thousands. Tens of thousands. One number circled 3 times in red ink. $42,500. I couldn't breathe. That was more than I'd ever made in a year, more than my house was worth. My son, a 19-year-old kid, had managed to bury himself under a mountain of debt I couldn't even comprehend. Beneath the numbers were names. Not banks. Not official organizations. These were street names. Razor, Big Mike, Red Jack, Men I'd heard about in whispers around Cleveland's East Side. Men tied to underground betting rings, fights, and things far uglier. And at the bottom of the page, in large bold letters, final payment due 1 week. My vision blurred. 1 week. That was all the time Ethan had before these men came for him. The second page was worse. Photos. Grainy, taken at night, but clear enough. Ethan outside a rundown bar, exchanging cash with a thick man in a leather jacket. Ethan inside a dingy backroom, cards scattered across a table, sweat dripping down his forehead. Ethan shaking hands with men whose faces screamed danger. My heart broke into pieces. This was my boy, the same boy who once promised he'd buy me a new truck when he made it pro. The same boy who used to practice throwing spirals in the yard until the sun dipped behind the houses. And now, he was drowning in a world that would chew him up and spit him out without blinking. I lowered the papers, my knuckles white. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, my voice hoarse. The man in the gray suit didn't flinch. "Because you're the only one who can save him. Ethan won't listen to anyone else. He's blinded by pride, by pressure. He thinks he can dig himself out, but he can't. Not this time. Save him." I laughed bitterly, though it felt more like choking. "He humiliated me last night. He told me I was nobody." The man stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "He said that because he's scared. That outburst wasn't about you. It was about him. He's cornered, drowning, and lashing out at the one person he knows won't abandon him." The words hit like a punch. I hated how much truth I felt in them. "Why me?" I whispered. "Why not the police? Why not his coaches? Somebody with power?" "Because the men he owes money to don't care about police or coaches. They care about blood. You're his father. That gives you leverage no one else has. But you have to act now. Tonight was your warning. Next week, it will be too late." I looked back down at the photos, my chest aching with a mix of anger, fear, and love. Ethan was my son, my only family left. And even if he saw me as nobody, I couldn't let him be swallowed by this darkness. The man turned to leave, his shoes echoing against the wet wood of the dock. 1 week, he called over his shoulder. After that, not even you will be able to reach him. I stood there in the rain, gripping the envelope, my mind spinning. I didn't know how to fight criminals. I didn't know how to erase a $42,500 debt. But I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let them take my son. Not while I still had breath in my body. When I got home that night, I placed the envelope on the kitchen table like it was a bomb that might go off at any second. The photos, the debts, the faces, they all stared at me like ghosts I couldn't ignore. I paced the living room, the floor creaking beneath my boots. Every instinct told me to storm into Ethan's room, slam the papers on his desk, and demand answers. But another part of me, the father part, knew that if I came at him like a storm, he'd shut down. He'd dig his heels in, deny everything, or worse, run. By the time I finally heard his key in the front door, my heart was hammering so hard I thought it might break through my chest. Ethan walked in around midnight, hood pulled over his head, eyes bloodshot. He tried to sneak past me, but I was already standing in the doorway. "Sit," I said firmly. He froze, eyes flicking toward me. "Dad, I'm tired. I've got practice tomorrow." "Sit." The weight in my voice left him no choice. He dropped his backpack and slumped into the chair across from me, arms folded like a sulking child. I slid the envelope across the table. His eyes followed it, suspicion creeping into his expression. "What's this?" "Open it," I said. He hesitated, then pulled out the pages. As his eyes scanned the first sheet, I saw the color drain from his face. His cocky posture collapsed, his shoulders tightening like a trapped animal. When he reached the photos, his lips parted, but no words came. He just stared, frozen. Finally, I broke the silence. "Tell me the truth, Ethan. How deep are you in?" His eyes flicked up, anger sparking. "Who gave this to you? Does it matter?" I shot back. "What matters is you're gambling with your life and mine." He shoved the papers back into the envelope, shaking his head. "You don't understand, Dad. I didn't mean for it to get this bad. It started small. Just bets with friends, a couple of $100. Then I won big. Then I lost bigger. And then these guys showed up." My chest tightened. "What guys?" He rubbed his face, groaning. "They call themselves Razor's Crew. They run the underground betting scene here. Football, basketball, even dog fights. They promised me quick money. Told me I had the talent to predict games. And when I couldn't pay up, they offered me credit. His voice cracked on the last word. Credit. That was their trap. 42,500, I said quietly. That's what they say you owe. His eyes widened. You saw the number? Yes, I saw it. Do you realize what kind of people you're messing with? Ethan's voice shook. I thought I could fix it, Dad. I thought if I played my best, got noticed by the scouts, signed a deal, I could pay them off before it got bad. But now, he buried his face in his hands. Now it's too late. I reached across the table, grabbing his wrists, forcing him to look at me. Listen to me. It is not too late. You are my son, and I will not let them take you down. Tears burned in my eyes, though I tried to hold them back. But then Ethan whispered words that cut me deeper than any debt ever could. You can't save me, Dad. You're nobody to them. And soon, I'll be nobody too. My throat closed. That word again, nobody. I sat back, fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. No, I said through gritted teeth. You're wrong. I may be nobody in their eyes, but I'm still your father, and I will find a way to end this. Ethan stared at me, broken, torn between anger and desperation. And for the first time in years, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not contempt, not arrogance, fear. The next 2 days crawled by like years. I barely slept, barely ate. Every time Ethan left the house, I wondered if he'd come back. I kept the envelope hidden in the drawer by my bed, like proof of the nightmare we were living. On Wednesday evening, the nightmare stepped right onto our front porch. It was just after dinner. Ethan had holed up in his room, blasting music through his headphones. I was in the kitchen, rinsing dishes, when I heard it. 3 heavy knocks on the door. Not friendly, not polite. Knocks that carried weight. I froze. The knocks came again. Louder. Wiping my hands, I walked to the door, heart hammering. Through the peephole, I saw them. 2 men I'd never seen before, but I didn't need names. Their shaved heads, tattooed necks, and leather jackets screamed trouble. I opened the door only a crack. Can I help you? The taller one smirked. A scar ran from his eyebrow to his cheek. Evening, old man. We're looking for Ethan. My gut clenched. He's not here. The shorter one laughed, showing gold teeth. That's funny. We saw him walk in an hour ago. Now why don't you step aside and let us say hello? I tightened my grip on the door. You're not coming in. Scarface's smile widened. Relax. We just want to remind him what happens when debts don't get paid. Consider it customer service. Before I could reply, Ethan appeared at the end of the hallway. His face went pale the moment he saw them. Razor's boys, he muttered under his breath. The gold-toothed thug leaned sideways to look past me. There he is, Golden Boy himself. Go back inside, I snapped at Ethan. My voice came out sharper than I intended, but he didn't move. He was frozen, like a rabbit caught in a trap. Scarface tapped the doorframe with his knuckle. Clock's ticking, Ethan. You've got 5 days left. Razor doesn't like waiting. You come up with the cash, or he comes up with other ways of collecting. Goldtooth chuckled. Nice house, by the way. Be a shame if something happened to it. Rage boiled in my chest. I shoved the door shut, but Scarface jammed his boot in the frame. The wood groaned under the pressure. I leaned my weight against the door, glaring through the crack. If you don't leave right now, I'm calling the cops. Scarface's grin didn't waver. Do that. But remember, cops can't protect you forever. With that, he pulled his boot back. The 2 men stepped away, laughing as they strolled down the walkway. I slammed the deadbolt, my hands shaking. My chest felt like it was about to explode. Ethan stood behind me, trembling. Dad, you shouldn't have done that. They don't bluff. If Razor says 5 days, he means 5 days. I turned, gripping his shoulders. Then we've got 5 days to figure this out. And we will. I don't care what it takes. But even as I said the words, a cold truth gnawed at the back of my mind. I had no idea how to raise $42,500 in less than a week. And the men who wanted it weren't going to wait patiently. The next morning, I was already up before the sun. My coffee went cold on the counter as I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the numbers scrawled across that cursed ledger. $42,500. It didn't matter how many times I read it. The number stayed the same, mocking me. I made a list. Banks. Old friends. The union rep at the factory. Even the pawn shop down on West 14th. Somewhere, somehow, there had to be a way. By 9 o'clock, I was sitting in a banker's office downtown. A polished young man in a navy blue suit clicked through my file on his computer, his face tightening with every screen he pulled up. Finally, he sighed and folded his hands. Mr. Miller, I'm afraid we can't approve a loan of that size. Your credit history and income just don't support it. I leaned forward, desperation creeping into my voice. Please, I'll work double shifts. I'll put the house up as collateral. Just give me something to work with. The banker shook his head, almost apologetic. I'm sorry. It's too much risk. I walked out into the gray Cleveland drizzle, feeling smaller than I ever had. Next stop, the factory. I cornered my supervisor during lunch break, explaining that I needed an advance. Even half would help. He just laughed bitterly. Tom, we're cutting hours, not handing out free cash. I wish I could help, but you're asking for a miracle. I tried the pawn shop next. Hauled in my old guitar, my tools, even my wedding ring. The owner, a tired man with nicotine-stained fingers, gave me a total that barely scratched the surface. $500. That's the best I can do. 500. Against 42,000. Like throwing a cup of water at a forest fire. By evening, I was running on fumes, my shoes soaked from walking block after block. I stopped at Joe's bar, a place I hadn't set foot in since my younger days. Joe had been my friend once, before life pulled us in different directions. He looked older, heavier, but when he saw me, his eyes lit up. Tommy boy, it's been what, 15 years? We sat, talked, drank a beer I couldn't even taste. Finally, I told him the truth. Not all of it, but enough. My son was in trouble. I needed money. Joe rubbed his beard, sighing. I've got a little tucked away. But Tom, I can maybe spot you $1,000. 2 if I push it. That's all. I thanked him, but inside, my chest caved in further. 2,000. Not enough. Never enough. When I finally dragged myself home, the house was dark except for the glow under Ethan's door. I stood there for a long time, hand hovering over the knob, wanting to tell him everything I tried today, wanting to tell him how impossible this felt. But instead, I walked past and collapsed into my recliner. My bones ached, but it was my soul that felt broken. I had always been the man who could fix things. Broken pipes, busted cars, scraped knees. If something was wrong, I'd find a way. But now I was staring at a mountain I couldn't climb. And Razor's men weren't going to wait for me to find a ladder. I closed my eyes, exhaustion pulling me under. For a moment, I almost slipped into sleep. Then a sound shattered the quiet. Glass breaking. From outside, I jolted upright, heart racing, and grabbed the flashlight from the counter. I rushed to the front window. On the porch lay a brick, shattered glass glittering around it. Taped to the brick was a note. I peeled it off with trembling hands and unfolded it under the beam of the flashlight. 4 days. Pay up, or we collect in blood. The brick on my porch had been a warning. But by the next night, it became clear Razor's crew wasn't bluffing anymore. Ethan came home late. As usual, I was sitting in the living room, pretending to watch TV, but really just waiting for him. The moment he walked in, I saw it, his hands trembling, his face pale, his shirt stained with dirt and something darker. What happened? I demanded, leaping to my feet. He tried to wave me off. It's nothing, Dad. Just leave it. I grabbed his arm. He winced. That's when I saw it. A cut running across his cheekbone, swollen and fresh. Who did this to you? Ethan's eyes glistened with shame. They jumped me. Razor's guys. They cornered me outside the gym. Said if I don't have the first payment tomorrow, they'll break more than my face. My chest tightened until it hurt to breathe. The bastards hadn't just thrown bricks. They'd laid their hands on my son. My boy, why didn't you go to the cops? I asked, though deep down, I already knew the answer. Ethan shook his head bitterly. You don't get it, Dad. These guys don't care about cops. Half the force probably owes them money too. If I snitch, I'm done. You're done. Everyone we know is done. I pressed a rag against his cheek, fighting the rage boiling in me. No, they don't get to do this. They don't get to touch my family. But Ethan's eyes, they were hollow, like he'd already accepted his fate. It's too late. They'll never let me walk away. That night, I couldn't sit still. My mind raced, my fists clenched. Every sound outside made me think Razor's crew was coming back. The letter in the drawer said 4 days. Now it was 3. The next morning, I drove Ethan's old Chevy to work, just to test a gut feeling I couldn't shake. I parked it outside the factory, went inside for an hour shift, then came back out. The windshield was smashed. All 4 tires slashed. A spray-painted message glared across the hood in dripping red letters. Next is him. My blood went cold. They weren't just warning anymore. They were promising. I called Ethan at school, voice shaking. Don't come out alone. Don't walk anywhere by yourself. Stay where people can see you. But as I hung up, the truth gnawed at me. I couldn't keep him safe forever. Not unless I ended this. That night, as Ethan slept upstairs, I sat at the kitchen table with the envelope of debts and photos spread before me. My head pounded, my heart twisted. I couldn't raise $42,500 in time. Banks were closed to me. Friends couldn't help. Razor's men weren't going to give us mercy. That left only one option. If I couldn't pay them, I'd have to fight them. But I wasn't a fighter. I was a steelworker, a man with calloused hands and a tired back. What chance did I have against men who lived in violence? And yet, when I pictured Ethan's face, swollen from the beating, I knew I didn't have a choice. I would find Razor, and I would end this. Somehow. Friday night fell over Cleveland like a heavy curtain. The city buzzed with weekend noise, bars spilling music into the streets, car horns blaring, laughter rising from sidewalks. But in our small house on the east side, the air was heavy, suffocating. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Razor's men had already broken glass, smashed a car, bloodied Ethan's face. The next step would be worse. I was right. Around 11 p.m., headlights cut across the living room walls. A car slowed outside. Then another. Engines idled, deep and throaty, far too expensive for our neighborhood. I stepped to the window. 3 black SUVs lined the curb, tinted windows reflecting the street lamps. My stomach dropped. Ethan, I whispered. He was upstairs, asleep. For a split second, I considered waking him. But before I could move, the knock came. Not 3 polite raps this time. One single boom that rattled the door on its hinges. I opened it before they broke it down. And there he was. Razor. He was taller than I expected, built like a linebacker who'd traded the field for crime. His suit was tailored, his beard trimmed sharp, but his eyes, cold, gray, merciless, were the kind that had seen too much blood. A jagged scar cut across his neck, peeking above his collar. 2 of his men flanked him, the same ones from before. But it was Razor who stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking against the porch. "Mr. Miller," he said, voice smooth as silk, dangerous as broken glass. "We haven't been properly introduced." I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. "You've made your point. You don't need to come here." He smiled faintly. "But I do. Your boy owes me 42.5 grand. That's not pocket change. That's a message. And messages must be respected." "He's just a kid," I said, my voice rising. "He made a mistake. Give him time." Time. Razor's smile vanished. He leaned closer, his breath hot with tobacco and whiskey. "Do you think I built my empire by giving time? No. I built it by collecting what I'm owed. On time. Every time." I swallowed hard. "I don't have the money. Not now." His eyes narrowed. "Then find it. Or maybe you'd prefer we collect in other ways." His gaze flicked toward the stairs, where Ethan's door creaked slightly. My son was listening. I stepped forward, blocking his view. "Don't you dare touch him." For the first time, Razor chuckled, low, humorless. "You've got spirit. I respect that. But spirit doesn't pay debts." He straightened, brushing invisible dust from his jacket. 3 days. That's all he gets. After that, Ethan's future ends before it begins. He turned to leave, his men following. But at the door, he paused, glancing back over his shoulder. "Oh, and Mr. Miller? Don't test me. If you go to the cops, if you try anything stupid, we won't just take your son. We'll take you." The SUVs roared to life, tires screeching as they disappeared into the night. I shut the door, my hands shaking so badly I could barely lock it. When I turned, Ethan was on the stairs, eyes wide with terror. "Dad, you can't fight him. Nobody can." I walked toward him, placing a hand on his shoulder. My voice cracked, but I forced the words out anyway. "Then I'll do the impossible. Because I'm not about to let Razor decide when my son's story ends." The house was silent after Razor's visit, but I couldn't rest. Every tick of the clock was a reminder. 3 days. That was all we had. Ethan stayed in his room, pacing like a caged animal, but I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook, scribbling everything I knew about Razor. Not much, not yet. But I'd lived in Cleveland long enough to hear whispers. Razor wasn't just some thug. He ran a network, gambling, debts, fights, protection services. Guys like him didn't survive by luck. They survived by controlling fear. But nobody was untouchable. The next morning, I drove across town, back to Joe's bar. Joe had always been connected, not in Razor's league, but close enough to know names. When he saw me come in, his face darkened. "Tom, you look like hell. What's going on?" I sat at the counter, lowering my voice. "Tell me about Razor." Joe's jaw clenched. He poured me a whiskey I didn't ask for. "You don't want to get involved with him." "I already am," I snapped. "He's got my boy by the throat. I need to know something. Anything. Weaknesses. Enemies. Dirt." Joe leaned back, studying me. Finally, he sighed. "Word is, Razor used to be small-time. Muscle for hire. But he got smart. Started fixing games, running bets, building connections with the kind of people you don't cross. Politicians. Cops. Even businessmen. He doesn't play fair, Tom. That's why he's still standing." I took a long sip, my hands trembling. There's got to be a way. Nobody's untouchable. Joe hesitated, then leaned closer. "There is one thing. He's got a brother. Younger. Name's Caleb. Word is, Razor covers for him. Pays off his mistakes. Keeps him hidden from the dirtier stuff. Family's his only soft spot." A spark lit in my chest. Family. That was the crack in his armor. "Where do I find him?" I asked. Joe shook his head. "Don't, Tom. You're walking into fire." "I'm already burning," I muttered. That night, back home, I searched. It took hours on the old laptop, digging through articles, forums, scraps of news. And finally, I found it. Caleb Hawkins, 26, busted twice for DUIs, once for possession. Both cases mysteriously disappeared. Razor's work, no doubt. A photo popped up, Caleb outside a downtown club, glassy-eyed, stumbling. A caption underneath, "Cleveland's most protected screw-up." My pulse quickened. Razor was dangerous, but even dangerous men had something to lose. I printed the photo, tucking it into the envelope with Ethan's debts. When I turned, Ethan was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, face pale. "What are you doing?" "Trying to save you," I said. He shook his head. "Dad, if you go after Razor, he'll kill you. He'll kill both of us." I walked toward him, gripping his shoulder. "Son, I've lived my life with nothing but calluses and bills. Razor thinks I'm nobody, maybe you do too. But I'll be damned if I sit here and watch him take you from me." Ethan's eyes welled up, but he didn't speak. He just turned and shut his door. Later, as I sat in the dark living room, I whispered to myself, more a vow than a thought. Razor's brother is the key. If he wants to play with fire, then I'll light the match. 2 days left. That number haunted me every time I looked at the clock. 2 days until Razor decided Ethan's fate. 2 days until blood. I knew I couldn't wait for the storm to hit. I had to strike first. And Caleb, Razor's brother, was the only angle I had. Late that night, I drove into downtown Cleveland. Neon signs buzzed, music thumped from clubs, laughter spilled onto sidewalks. Somewhere in that chaos, Caleb Hawkins was wasting another night of his charmed life. It didn't take long to find him. Outside a nightclub on Euclid Avenue, he stood near the valet, drunk out of his mind. Designer jacket, gold chain, stumbling with a cigarette dangling from his lips. 2 women clung to his arms, both laughing at whatever nonsense he was slurring. I parked half a block away, my old pickup looking like a rusted ghost among the BMWs and Cadillacs. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard the leather cracked under my palms. What was I about to do? I wasn't a criminal. I wasn't a fighter. I was just a father with nothing left to lose. I stepped out, pulling my hood low, and waited by the alley across from the club. Minutes passed. Caleb eventually shoved the women into a cab, stumbling toward his own black Mercedes. He fumbled with the keys, cursing under his breath. That's when I moved. "Caleb Hawkins?" I said, stepping into the dim glow of the streetlight. He squinted, swaying. "Who the hell are you?" I didn't answer. Instead, I shoved him against the Mercedes, my forearm pressed into his chest. His cigarette dropped to the pavement, hissing out in a puddle. "Listen to me," I growled, my voice low, shaking from both rage and fear. "You're Razor's brother, and Razor's got my son in his pocket. If he doesn't back off, everyone in Cleveland will know exactly how much he's been covering for you." Caleb's eyes widened, panic sobering him up fast. What are you talking about?" I pulled the folded photo from my jacket, the one of him stumbling drunk outside another club. "You've been arrested. Possession, DUIs, assaults. Every time, it disappears. Why? Because your brother cleans up your mess. How do you think the press, the cops, and his rivals would like to know Razor's empire has a spoiled little brother dragging him down? Caleb tried to shove me off, but I slammed him back harder. You don't get it, old man. If you touch me, Razor will. Razor already threatened me. I cut in. I'm not afraid of him anymore. You tell your brother this. If he doesn't leave my son alone, I'll make sure every dirty cop, every reporter, every rival he is gets your name, your record, and the proof that Razor's been protecting you. Caleb's breathing grew ragged. His arrogance cracked, revealing fear underneath. You don't know what you're doing. He'll kill you. Maybe, I said, stepping back. But if he touches my son, I'll make sure he loses the one thing he still cares about, you. For a moment, silence stretched between us. Caleb's chest rose and fell, his eyes darting like a trapped animal. Finally, I let him go, shoving him toward his Mercedes. Tell him, I ordered. Then I walked back to my truck, every nerve in my body screaming. As I drove away, headlights in my mirror made my stomach twist. A black SUV followed me for 3 blocks before peeling off. They knew. Razor's crew already knew I'd gone after his brother. And when Razor found out, the storm wouldn't just hit. It would destroy everything in its path. The following evening, I was sitting in the kitchen with the lights off, staring at the darkened window like it was a stage curtain hiding the inevitable. Ethan was upstairs, restless, pacing again. He didn't know what I'd done. Not yet. The sound of engines cut through the silence. My stomach dropped. I stepped to the window. 3 black SUVs again, parked at the curb. My chest tightened as the doors opened and men stepped out. Razor wasn't sending a message this time. He was here. I unlocked the front door before they could break it. And there he was, Razor, towering on my porch, suit flawless, eyes colder than the Cleveland wind. Behind him stood Caleb, his younger brother, head lowered, face pale. Razor's smile was razor thin. Mr. Miller, he said calmly, we need to have a word. I held the door halfway shut, my knuckles white on the frame. Then say it. He pushed forward, forcing me to step back. His men fanned out, boots heavy on the porch. Caleb lingered at the bottom step, refusing to look at me. You think you're clever, Razor said softly, almost like a teacher scolding a student, cornering my little brother outside a club, threatening him, waving his mistakes around like you've got power. His eyes narrowed. Do you know how many men tried that before you? Do you know where they are now? I swallowed hard, but forced my voice steady. I don't care about your threats. You touch my son, I'll blow your world wide open. Every cop, every rival, every reporter will know Caleb is your Achilles heel. For a moment, the night went still. Then Razor laughed, low, chilling. You've got guts, I'll give you that. But guts don't win wars. Money does. Power does. And you, Mr. Miller, have neither. He stepped closer until his face was inches from mine. You've got 48 hours. That's all. And if you ever come near Caleb again, you won't live to see your boy's next game. Behind him, Caleb finally spoke, his voice trembling. Razor, maybe we should. Shut up, Razor snapped without turning. His command cut through the air like a whip. Caleb flinched, silenced instantly. Razor's men shifted, waiting for his signal. For a terrifying second, I thought he'd give it, that they'd end me right there in my own house. But instead, he smirked, tapping the doorframe with one gloved finger. 2 days, he repeated. No more warnings. Then he turned and walked away, his men following, Caleb dragged along like a shadow. The SUVs roared to life and disappeared into the night. I shut the door, locking it with shaking hands. My knees nearly buckled beneath me. From the stairs, I heard Ethan's voice. He'd been watching. His face was pale, eyes wide. Dad, what did you do? I sat heavily on the couch, burying my face in my hands. I did what I had to. Ethan shook his head, stepping closer. You don't get it. You're not dealing with guys you can scare. Razor doesn't lose. Ever. If you push him harder, he'll kill you. He'll kill both of us. I lifted my head, my voice rough but steady. Then let him try? Because I'd rather die fighting than let him own you. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. He tried to blink away. For the first time, his anger slipped, replaced by something I hadn't seen in years. Fear and love, tangled together. But before I could say more, the phone rang. The old landline on the kitchen wall. its shrill tones slicing through the heavy silence. I picked it up with a trembling hand. A voice on the other end whispered, "Mr. Miller, if you want to take Razor down, meet me tomorrow night. Alone." Then the line went dead. I barely slept after that phone call. The voice on the other end had been low, urgent, almost frantic. Whoever it was, they knew Razor, maybe even better than I did. But walking into another stranger's plan could be suicide. By the next night, my decision was made. I couldn't wait for Razor's clock to run out. If this mysterious caller had a way to take him down, I had to hear it. I told Ethan I was working late, though the look in his eyes told me he didn't believe me. Still, he didn't stop me. Maybe he knew this fight had reached a point of no return. The address was scribbled in the caller ID log, a warehouse near the old shipping district, long abandoned after the steel companies pulled out. Rusted fences surrounded the lot, broken glass crunching under my boots as I stepped inside. The warehouse loomed in the moonlight, its windows shattered, graffiti crawling up its walls. Inside, shadows stretched across cracked concrete. The air reeked of rust and oil. "Mr. Miller." The voice came from the dark. A man stepped forward, pulling his hood down. He was maybe mid-30s, wiry build, scars tracing his jawline. His eyes were sharp, restless, but alive, like a man who'd been running too long. "Who are you?" I asked, fists clenched at my sides. "Name's Ryan. I used to run with Razor. Before I realized he doesn't leave survivors." I narrowed my eyes. "Why call me? Why now?" Ryan pulled a folder from his jacket, tossing it onto a dusty crate. "Because you're the only one stupid enough, or desperate enough, to go after him. And because I know where it hurts." I opened the folder. Inside were documents, photos, receipts, offshore accounts, payoffs to cops, evidence of game fixing. Enough dirt to bury a man alive, if it was real. My pulse quickened. "Where did you get this?" "I collected it before I got out. Insurance, in case Razor ever came after me. But nobody listens to a washed-up bookie. You, though? You've got a story. A father fighting for his son. People eat that up. The press would burn him alive with this." I shook my head. "You think Razor will just sit back while I hand this to a reporter? He'll kill me before the ink dries." Ryan leaned closer, his eyes intense. "That's why you don't go to the press first. You use it. You make him sweat. You make him believe that if he touches your son, every one of these files will land in the wrong hands." It was blackmail. Dangerous, reckless blackmail. "Why help me?" I asked. Ryan's face hardened. "Because Razor took everything from me. My money, my family, my freedom. Helping you hurt him? That's the closest thing to justice I'll ever get." I stared at the folder, the weight of it pressing into my chest. With this, I could finally stand toe-to-toe with Razor. But the risk, one wrong move, and Ethan and I would both vanish into the dark. Ryan must have seen the hesitation in my eyes. "You've got one day left. Either you fight with this, or you wait for Razor to collect. Your choice." He shoved the folder into my hands and slipped back into the shadows, gone as quickly as he appeared. I stood alone in the warehouse, the folder heavy in my grip, my heart pounding. One day left. Tomorrow, it would all end. One way or another. The next evening, the sky over Cleveland burned red as the sun sank behind the factories. It felt like the whole city was holding its breath. Razor's deadline was here. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, head in his hands. He hadn't spoken much all day. I laid the folder Ryan gave me on the table in front of him. "What's that?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Leverage," I said. "It's the only chance we've got." He lifted the cover, eyes scanning the files. His face drained of color. "Dad, if Razor knows you have this, he'll kill us." I leaned forward, meeting his eyes. "He's going to kill us anyway if we don't fight. But with this, we can make him think twice. Maybe long enough to get you out." For the first time, Ethan didn't argue. He just nodded slowly, fear and trust mixing in his expression. By midnight, we were standing at Dock 47, the same place this nightmare began. The fog was thick, rolling across the water. Headlights cut through the mist as Razor's SUVs pulled up, engines growling. He stepped out, calm and composed, Caleb trailing behind him. His men fanned out like wolves circling prey. "Well, Mr. Miller," Razor said, spreading his arms. "I trust you brought my money." "I brought something better," I said, holding up the folder. His eyes narrowed, the first crack in his composure. "What is that?" "Proof," I said, "of your payoffs. Your offshore accounts. Your little brother's messes. Enough to bury you in front of every rival, every cop, every newspaper in this city. Touch my son, and this goes public. Razor's face hardened. His men shifted uneasily. Caleb's eyes darted to the ground. You think you can blackmail me? Razor hissed, stepping closer. Do you know how many people have tried? Do you know where they are now? I know where I'll be, I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my chest. Standing between you and my son. Because I may be nobody in your world, Razor, but I'm somebody when it comes to him. And I will burn your empire down before I let you take him. For a moment, the dock was silent except for the lapping waves. Then Razor laughed, low and bitter. You've got fire, old man. But fire burns out. He snapped his fingers. 2 men advanced toward me. Ethan suddenly stepped forward, planting himself between us. His voice cracked, but carried across the dock. No. You want blood? You take mine. But you don't touch my father. The words froze Razor mid-step. He hadn't expected defiance, not from Ethan. I looked at my son, pride and heartbreak swelling in my chest. For the first time since this nightmare began, he was standing with me. Razor's jaw tightened. He glanced at Caleb, then at the folder still in my grip. He knew the truth. Killing us would only scatter the evidence like ash in the wind. Finally, he sneered. You've won yourself time. But this isn't over. He turned sharply, his men following. The SUVs roared away, swallowed by the fog. Caleb gave me one last haunted look before disappearing with them. Silence returned to the dock. Ethan turned to me, tears streaming down his face. Dad, I'm sorry. For everything. For the beer, the words, the debt. I thought I had to carry it alone. But I see now, you were always carrying me. I pulled him into an embrace, my chest heaving. You don't have to say sorry, son. You just have to promise me one thing, no more secrets. He nodded against my shoulder. No more. As we walked back to the truck, I knew the battle wasn't truly over. Razor would be back, and the storm wasn't gone, only delayed. But tonight, I had my son beside me. Tonight, he had chosen me. And that was enough to remind me that even nobodies can stand tall.